Hi, guys. Excellent. Give everybody just a couple more seconds to get here. Um, I've been keeping track of some of the comments you guys are leaving. I was asking for suggestions for things that you guys want to talk about in the future, topics you want to cover, stuff like that. So I've been keeping track of what you guys have been talking about. The last thing I saw just now was Christine saying that this new school has her fantasizing about moving back to New Orleans. Um, and that reminded me just to, kind of keep you guys up to speed. We are leaving to go to New Orleans on the 16th. I can't remember what day of the week that is, but it's coming up pretty quick. I mean, can you believe we are already this deep into April? I mean, the month of April is already, what is this, like a quarter of the way over? I mean, this year is just passing by like crazy. Somebody's saying they can't hear. Can you guys hear? Can you guys hear me? Someone was saying they don't have any sound. They don't have any audio. Yes. Okay. All right. Just making sure it wasn't on my end. Okay. Thanks, guys. Excellent. So we're leaving on the 16th to go down to New Orleans, and we have several places lined up already to look at. Some really great places. And, honestly, I am getting more and more excited by the day. It's odd for me thinking about this just because I never thought that I would ever leave New York. I thought this was probably going to be my home until the day I died. And it probably would have been if not for the state of the world, everything changing, everything that's going on in the world, and the changes that it's caused in New York. I probably would have stayed here forever. So it's kind of another one of those tower card situations where it's the kind of destruction that's happened here, which is propelling me to begin something new that I wouldn't have otherwise. So I guess while we're waiting, we're going to talk about the lesser hexagram ritual today, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I'm going to talk about, let's see, while we're waiting, I saw some people said they wanted to hear more like biblical, talking about, hold on guys, just reading what you're all saying. Oh yeah, Andrew says, is New York different for you now post-pandemic? Definitely, yeah. I mean, New York is so different in so many ways now. They said something like over 500,000 people left the city whenever the pandemic hit. And the people who left, it was all like artists and musicians and people who were creating, this vibrant scene here. All that's gone. All those people left. They went to other places. So now the only thing that's really left here are like really, really rich people and really, really poor people and people that are just stuck here because they work or what have you. But yeah, New York is definitely, I've seen massive change. The energy is not the same here. But it's also, it just made me think how, like, doing a school here in the city, there's no way that I could have ever been able to afford to like start, a brick and mortar school, a place where people can actually come to. It would have had to always be online. Just because it would cost you, millions and millions of dollars. Whereas somewhere like New Orleans, you could do it for just a tiny fraction of the cost. See what you guys are talking about. Okay, so the Bible stuff. I figured I would start with a couple of things that people had actually asked me about this week. I've had someone ask me about the story of Jesus walking on water. So that's one of the ones we're going to get to. And we are Oh, give me 1 second. I'm going to cover these up. I'm covering the comments up so that I don't see them and forget what I'm talking about. And I'll uncover those a little later. So just remember that I'm not able to see what you're saying right now. But whenever we get back in just a few minutes, I'll uncover those and I'll see what you guys are talking about and we'll pick up from there. So the first one I'm going to start off with is when Jesus curses a fig tree. And this is one of those really odd stories that people have trouble making sense out of. And it's in a few different places, but I'm going to read you the version from the book of Mark. And it's chapter 11, verses 12 through 25. So I'm going to read you what it says first, and then tell you not only what it means, but hopefully, well, let me read it to you. The next day, this story takes place immediately after Jesus has just fed the multitudes with 2 fish and loaves of bread. And the reason for the 2 fish, it's because Christ represents the Aeon of Pisces, which we're now leaving. We're leaving Pisces and starting Aquarius, but the symbol for Pisces is 2 fish. That's why Jesus feeds the multitudes with 2 fish. That's why he calls his disciples fishers of men, all that kind of stuff, because all of that is about Pisces. So he feeds the multitudes with 2 fish, and then this picks up immediately after that story is over. The next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, because they feared him, because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. When evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Peter remembered and said to Jesus, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered." "Have faith in God," Jesus answered. "I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, 'Go, throw yourself into the sea,' and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins." So there's a bunch of different things there that are all working together. So the first thing, starting with the tree, the reason it goes into the story about him throwing the money changers out of the temple, this is the story where he ends up actually taking a strap to people and whipping them to get them out of the temple. All of these things are connected in a certain way. What the tree represents, what the fig tree represents, is fake teachers. Really, it's as simple as that. That's what it comes down to. Now, it starts off talking about seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf. He went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. So first off, if you take this story at face value, you see that Jesus is going to look at this fig tree and he curses it for not having figs on it, even though it says it's not the season for figs. Figs aren't even growing yet. But he curses the tree anyway because there's no figs on it. That's because it says, let me see, when he reached it, he found nothing but leaves. So this is where you have to know a little bit about fig trees. When you're talking about fig trees, the way they bloom, the way they blossom, leaves on fig trees come out after the figs have formed. After the tree has started to develop fruit, then the leaves come out. So if you see a fig tree with leaves on it, then technically if you go up to it, it should have figs on it already because it's already got the leaves there, and figs grow before leaves. So what that symbolizes is, take it out of the realm of tree for a second and talk about it like it's a person. The fact that it has leaves on it, if that were a person, what it symbolizes is that person is trying to make it look like they actually produce fruit, that they're teaching something that is in some way going to sustain people, feed people, that is going to lead to something worthwhile and good. They're not actually doing that. It's all a show. That's what the leaves mean. The leaves are there, the fruit is not. It means they are trying to look like teachers, but they're not real teachers because they're not producing any fruit. The way this ties into the story of him going into the temple and throwing out the money changers is because that's the money changers are once again people who are trying to use spirituality. They don't give a damn about, elevating consciousness, changing the people's lives, helping them complete the great work. They didn't care about any of that. They were using these teachings for gain in some way. It's the only thing that meant anything to them. So you've got fake teachers in the story of the fig tree. That's what it represents. And you've got people who are just using these teachings as the money changers. That's why those two things are tied together into this one big story. Let me see, there were other things here to touch on. And this is another thing too. It's like the second he starts talking about this stuff, the second he starts throwing people out of the temple, it says immediately they start looking at him and wanting to kill him. This is still true to this day. I mean, they're basically haters. They saw someone who was real. They saw someone who was doing what they were pretending to do, and it pissed them off. It made them angry. It reminded them of what they were and what he was and what they were not by comparison. So they wanted to kill him because they didn't want to be reminded of that stuff. They don't want to be shown not only to the world for being false, but also having to see it themselves. Whenever they saw the real deal, they didn't like that. So that's why they want to kill him. So let's see. He says, after he curses the tree and it withers up, and Peter says, look, the fig tree you cursed withered up. Jesus says, I tell you, if anyone says to this, and this is a key. I always tell people the Bible is one of the, if not what the Bible is the history of magic. It is the history of how the current of astrotheurgy has been passed down through time, through civilizations, all the way from the dawn of Sumer to right now. You'll hear people talk about biblical times, like they'll say back in biblical times. There is no back in biblical times. We are still in biblical times right now. The story is still unfolding. It's still going. But the Bible is that not only the history of magic, but it also has things put all through it that tell you how to do magic effectively. And this is one of the things that a lot of people don't get. Jesus says, have faith in God. Truly, I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, blah, blah, blah. I'll get to that in a minute. The point of what I just read about the mountain, you'll notice he didn't say ask God to do it. He didn't say ask him to do it. He didn't say, pray, Jesus, will you move this mountain for me? That's not what he said. He said, you say to this mountain, move, and it will be moved. That's how we do magic. We don't necessarily have to ask anyone for anything. And the reason, I'm not even going to say that yet. It's pointing to how powerful your words are and your will is. How you have divinity within you, just like he did. Jesus says at one point, anything that I do, you can also do, and even more, and even greater. He's saying, you tell it to move. Don't ask him to do it. You do it. Just looking at my notes. Okay, so the next one, I'm going to skip ahead now and go to the walking on water story and talk about what this means for a second, just because I was talking with a friend this week, and she was saying that's one story that she brings up over and over and over just because of the familiarity of it from childhood. And she's saying, what does it symbolize? What does it mean? So first off, we've talked before about how in biblical symbolism, water symbolizes the masses. Water symbolizes the uninitiated. Wine symbolizes the initiated. Water symbolizes the uninitiated. That's why Jesus turns water into wine. He turns uninitiates into initiates. It's through his power that is done. And when I say his, I'm not talking about a man, Jesus. I am talking about the power of Christ, which is eternal. But, and I'll give you an example. Like, for example, when Moses is running from the Egyptians, and it says he parts the Red Sea, and it gives the Hebrews, while they're traveling through, it gives them dry ground to walk on. And then the minute the Egyptians start trying to cross, the water closes over them and wipes them all off the face of the earth. That represents how this Egyptian current of magic it did not survive unbroken into modern times. It was swallowed up by the masses, by the uninitiated. It came to an end. It was drowned out by this tidal wave of uninitiated people who didn't even understand what was going on in that part of the world. No matter who tells you, you'll hear people claim sometimes that there is an unbroken lineage of Egyptian magicians, that the current of magic from ancient Egypt has been passed on and survives all the way up until modern times. The Bible says that is not true. It says it was swallowed up by the uninitiated masses. The Sumerian current, on the other hand, does still exist, has been passed unbroken from the dawn of ancient Sumer to now. And it's been done in a few different ways. Like, for example, Judaism. That's what Judaism is. Judaism was born from the Sumerian tradition. Christianity was born from the Judaic tradition. So Christianity and Judaism both are part of this unbroken current, this unbroken lineage that goes all the way back from ancient Sumer, and magicians within those two currents. And I'm talking about people like the prophet Ezekiel, all of the prophets of the Old Testament were initiates of this current. Same way with Jesus. The thing about the walking on water too, Well, let me read you the story first. I'm going to stop and read you the story. And this is also from Matthew. It's Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. So this is after Jesus has just been teaching. He's just been teaching a sermon. No, this is the one. I'm sorry, I mangled it a while ago. This is the one that happens immediately after he feeds the multitudes. So after this happens, after he's feeding the multitudes, after he's teaching them, he tells the disciples, go ahead, get in a boat and leave. I'm going to get rid of everybody here, and then I'm going to go up higher into the mountain, and I'm going to pray. Y'all go ahead. The disciples get in the boat and take off. So it says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Peter then speaks up. Peter says, Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. So it's not just the water here. The water is not the only important thing. The other important thing is the storm. You know, it's talking about the wind blowing, buffeting the boat. That's talking about a storm that's happening. If water represents the masses, the uninitiated, then the storm represents things that cause turbulence among the masses, turbulent times among the uninitiated. Christ walking on water, walking across the top of it, as well as telling Peter, come to me, and letting Peter walk on top of it as well. Those represent both of them not sinking down into that, for lack of a better word, bullshit. All the stuff going on in the world doesn't faze them. They walk right across the top of it, unfazed, untouched. The thing about it is, Peter, in order for him to do it, has to call out to Christ. He has to invoke him. He has to invoke the power of Christ in order for him to be able to perform this miracle, if you want to call it that. Same way with us. It is by invoking divinity, pulling it into ourselves, that we can do this same miracle. We can walk above the crap that goes on, that the whole rest of the world, that the masses, that the uninitiated, that those who have no connection to the source, everything that makes their lives miserable, throws them around, causes havoc and destruction. None of that will touch us. You know, it's like Jesus says, I will prepare a table for you in the midst of your enemies. He doesn't say you won't have enemies. He just said that even there in the midst of them, they won't be able to touch you. They won't be able to do anything to you. He will prepare a table for you even there. You will be rewarded. You'll be sustained. You'll be provided for, even right in the middle of people who want to kill you. So the storm and the water, and the important thing is Peter invoking him. That's kind of given us, you know, like I said, the Bible is a book of magic. My brain went blank. Oh, so it's telling us to invoke this power. Oh, and another thing, one thing that puts this in perspective, this whole walking on water scenario, this is not unique to Christianity by any means. This goes back to other previous aeons in the history of the current of magic. You will find um, the walking on water. It also happened it was said to be done by Xerxes the Great of Persia, a Persian king, thousands of years before Christ. Xerxes, there were stories that said he walked on water. You can also still find stories that said Alexander the Great walked on water. The Greeks were the empire that conquered the Persians. The Greeks were the next world ruling empire after Persia. We'll get to all that stuff in just a second. If you want to, we'll go deeper into that, like why that's significant and all it means and all that kind of stuff. But, just pointing that out, this is not unique to Christianity, and it means the same thing in all these traditions. The thing about all of these earlier traditions is the only way you were given or provided with the key that would allow you to decipher what this stuff meant. Like most people have never known what this stuff means. Most people take it literally. They are still waiting for a man who literally walked across the top of a lake to come like floating out of the clouds and take them up to a city made out of gold. It's and that was that's always been the case. The uninitiated have always, like when they're talking about these stories, there's two ways of understanding them. There's front speech and back speech. Front speech is what you hear on the surface. You can't take, those who know what this stuff really is, those who have been taught this stuff, those who have been part of this lineage, never took front speech at face value. Initiates were always aware of the back speech, the stories behind what these symbols and images mean or represent. Let me see if there's anything else in that. I think that's all for that. So I'll come back to something else. We'll come back to the history of magic and like Persia and Greece and all of that kind of stuff. If you want to, if we have time and we get to the end of this, but I really do want to get first into the lesser hexagram ritual. And the reason I brought this up is because a lot of people get confused by this ritual in the beginning. They get confused about why the elements are not in the same order they are when you're doing the lesser ritual of the pentagram, the lesser banishing or the lesser invoking rituals of the pentagram. They're not the same, and that confuses a lot of people. And I was reminded of that. I was talking to someone that I'm tutoring this week, and they were asking me about that. And I remember trying to figure that out myself years ago in the beginning until I understood why. A lot of times in magic in the beginning, this stuff will not be explained to you. They basically give you some rituals. They give you the pentagram ritual, they give you the hexagram ritual, they give you the rose cross ritual, the middle pillar, and they say, here, go do these. They don't tell you what to expect, what it's doing to yourself, what it's doing to the environment, or anything else. So a lot of people, it takes years to begin to understand like what's happening and what this stuff represents and what it symbolizes. So think of this. First let me say, so when you're doing the lesser pentagram ritual, the east is air, the south is fire, the west is water, and the north is earth. Well, what these represent are, when you're doing these, they also correspond to a season. A season, you're mimicking, while you're doing this ritual, you're mimicking the way the sun passes through the seasons in the course of a year. East is spring. South is summer. West is autumn. And north is winter. That's the path of the sun. That's how the sun affects life on Earth. Now, the thing about the sun in magic, the sun represents your personal consciousness. The sun makes life on Earth possible. The sun is what everything in our solar system revolves around. Just like our consciousness makes life in these bodies possible. That's why the sun corresponds to consciousness. So when you're invoking or banishing doing the pentagram rituals, what you're doing is using the symbol of consciousness to send messages deep to your subconscious, your unconscious mind, your psyche, your soul, for what you want it to do. So you're separating it into these 4 distinct seasons. These seasons, like I said just a second ago, represent what happens on the earth while this solar consciousness is at particular stages in its cycle. So, you know how in alchemy, basically the point of alchemy is to take things and break them down into more and more components, separate something into its component parts, separate it down as finely as you possibly can, purify all of those parts, and then put them back together in a way that is pure or better than it was when you started. And that's what makes things like tinctures and spagyrics so potent, is because you've taken something, you've purified it, removed the base materials from it, and then put the purified parts back together. This is what you're doing to yourself with all of these rituals. So say when you're doing the lesser pentagram ritual, it's how the sun moves through the seasons when it's doing, how the earth expresses these seasons. See what I'm saying? With the hexagram, the lesser hexagram ritual, you're breaking those seasons down even more. Not just into 4 big chunks, but you're breaking them down into the astrological signs that correspond to these particular seasons. When you're doing the lesser hexagram ritual, what you're working with is, if the first phase, the pentagram ritual, is the sun moving through the 4 seasons, the second ritual, the lesser hexagram ritual, is the sun moving through the constellations in the course of a year. This is expressed through the lesser hexagram ritual by this, and this is why they don't match the same directions as the pentagram ritual. In the lesser hexagram ritual, east is fire. In the pentagram ritual, it's air. In the hexagram ritual, south is earth. In the pentagram ritual, south is fire. In the hexagram ritual, west is air. In the pentagram ritual, west is water. In the hexagram ritual, the north is water. In the pentagram ritual, north is earth. So why are these different? What's the first? Remember what I just said. The hexagram ritual is the sun as it's moving through the constellations in the course of a year. What's the first constellation? What's the starting point of the zodiac? Aries. Aries is the first sign that the sun begins its journey in every year. What is Aries? Aries is a fire symbol. Or fire, what's the word? Not symbol, sign. Aries is a fire sign. That's why you start drawing the hexagram of fire in the east. What's the second sign of the zodiac that the sun goes into? Taurus. Taurus is earth. That's why your second direction, you go from fire to earth in the south. What's the third sign of the zodiac? Gemini. What is Gemini? It's an air sign. So that's why it's in the third place, where water usually is in the pentagram ritual. The fourth sign of the zodiac is Cancer. Cancer is a water sign. That's why the water hexagram goes in the fourth place, where earth is in the pentagram ritual. So fire, earth, air, water. That's the first four signs of the zodiac that the sun passes through. However, that system repeats itself 3 times as it goes through the zodiac. 3 times. Fire, earth, air, water. Fire, earth, air, water. Fire, earth, air, water. 3 times. This is what you'll hear people in astrology talking about triplicities. This is triplicities. This is the triplicity. The way it goes through: Aries, fire; Taurus, earth; Gemini, air; Cancer, water; Leo, fire; Virgo, earth; Libra, air; Scorpio, water; Sagittarius, fire; Capricorn, earth; Aquarius, air; Pisces, water. So you see that this repeats itself 3 times, this pattern. So when you do the pentagram ritual, you're aligning your consciousness with the most evident cycle of the sun, which is the seasons. We can all see the seasons. We can all perceive the seasons. What they mean whenever they say that with the hexagram ritual, you're working with something higher, most people don't perceive that. Most people don't see the sun pass. They don't see which sign of the zodiac the sun is in when it's passing through. So what you're doing is breaking the absolute lowest levels of consciousness down with these 2 rituals. Then from these 2, from the lesser pentagram ritual and the lesser hexagram ritual, those being the first 2 that you do. After that, you start working with the greater hexagram ritual. The greater hexagram ritual, one second, because I wrote something down so I wouldn't mangle it or forget it. So the greater hexagram ritual, when you're doing the lesser banishing of the pentagram and the lesser banishing of the hexagram, you're focused mainly on the lowest aspects of consciousness. You are focused on the way life on Earth responds to the journey of the sun as the sun is moving through its cycle, its orbit. When you go on to the greater hexagram ritual, what you're working with is the sun itself. Now, whenever you're working with the greater hexagram, and we did a couple of those on here before. We've charged water. Remember when we were doing the exercises where we would charge water with the Yesod hexagram, and then we would charge it with the Saturn hexagram? Well, anytime you're working with the greater hexagram, you always charge it. You know how when you're doing the pentagram rituals, and you do this with the lesser hexagram too. Anytime you're doing hexagrams, you're actually using this, you're charging it with the same word. So you know how when you do the pentagram rituals, everyone gets charged with a different word. Yehovah, Adonai, Eye, Agela. When you're working with the hexagram rituals, you charge all of them with Ararita. And Ararita is not exactly, we've talked about this before, it's not really a word. What it is the first letter of every word in a Hebrew phrase. What this phrase is 1 is his beginning, 1 is his individuality, his permutation is 1. You're taking that sentence and seeing it in Hebrew, and then taking the first letter of each word and putting them together, and you come up with the word Ararita. That's what you're charging the hexagrams with. But what this hexagram represents is no longer the effect that the sun has on Earth. It is focused on the sun itself. You have went from the effect that consciousness has in this world, that consciousness has on this body, to consciousness itself. You know how whenever you are drawing the solar hexagram, the hexagram that corresponds to the sun, whenever you're drawing that, you're literally drawing every other hexagram from every other planet, just overlapping. What that symbolizes, you know how all the other planetary hexagrams form the solar hexagram? All of them together make up the solar hexagram. That's expressing how all of the other planets are just different expressions of the sun. They are like different aspects of the sun. And you can see this in things like how the moon reflects the sun's light. You know, whenever you're looking at the moon, the moon doesn't really give off any light. The moon has no light to give off. The moon is reflecting the sun's light. So that's the way that all of the planets, what they symbolize when you're doing this ritual. So you have gone from dissecting or breaking down the effects of consciousness in this world to breaking down consciousness itself, breaking down your consciousness. That's what you're doing when you start doing the hexagram ritual. And you have to break down your consciousness if you're going to experience what people call crossing the abyss, which is when individual consciousness disintegrates. You cease to exist, at least for a short period of time, and experience yourself as a larger consciousness instead. That's what you're beginning to do whenever you start working with the greater hexagram ritual. So that phrase, one is his beginning, one is his individuality, his permutation is one. Well, the his that they're talking about in that sentence is the sun. That's what it means. One is his beginning, one is his individuality, his permutation is one. You're saying all of these other planets are just different aspects of the sun. Yeah, I guess that's about it. Is that? Let me think. And from there, once you're finished with this alchemical process of breaking down consciousness, dividing it into its component parts, you've divided it into the seasons, you've divided it symbolically into the zodiac. You have then started to break apart consciousness and divide it into the other planetary aspects. And that's sort of how your consciousness is not like, your aura is not one thing. Your aura is made up of a bunch of different layers or levels. That's what we're experiencing whenever we're breaking consciousness down. We start to experience all these different levels of ourself. But from there, once you get into the greater hexagram ritual and start breaking consciousness down, from that point, you transcend even individual consciousness. That's when you start working with the supreme ritual of the pentagram. The supreme ritual of the pentagram is when you have transcended, in the beginning we started off with Earth. Like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram, those are both about Earth. Then you go to consciousness, the greater hexagram ritual. This is about the sun and about consciousness. So you've gone from Earth to the sun. When you graduate from that and start working with the supreme invoking ritual of the pentagram, or you can also do it with the Nokian, either way, like the watchtower rituals, what you have done then is transcended the sun and started working amongst the sphere of what they call the fixed stars. You've went from Earth to the sun to the fixed stars. The fixed stars, like that's the system that Sumerian magic was based on. It was based on the fixed stars. That's why the Lamassu represents Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio, because those 4 signs of the zodiac are what they call fixed signs, meaning you see them all night long, every single night of the year, and you would even see them during the daytime if the sun didn't wasn't so bright it blocked them out. So from that point on, when you're breaking down individual consciousness with the greater hexagram ritual, when you transcend and start doing the supreme pentagram ritual, that's when you are breaking down not individual consciousness anymore, but God consciousness. You have started to experience God consciousness, but now you have to take it through the same alchemical process that you took your own consciousness through. That's when you start doing the real deep angel work, because the angels represent aspects of this God consciousness. That's why what angels really are basically aspects of God. Like the name Raphael, it means healing of God. Raphael is just like symbolic of one thing that God consciousness does, which is heal. So the angels are just aspects of God. When you start breaking those down, when you start invoking, you've got the 12 angels or the 12 archangels of the constellations of the zodiac. Beyond those, you've got the 36 angels of the deacons. Beyond those, you've got the 72 angels of the Shem operation. When you're working with all of those, you're doing the same thing. You are breaking down God consciousness into its component parts. You will put them back together whenever you transcend the tree of life. Once you get to Kether, you've basically finished the great work. But there are veils even above Kether. The Ein Sof, those represent the whole from which even the tree of life came. What you do from that point on, when you get to the stage where you can begin invoking the Ein, which is like the place beyond places. I say place, it's not a place, it's not a thing. It's the no thing. It is no thing. When you can begin invoking that, that's when everything comes back together into a whole. When you're no longer separating things anymore. All of the work up till that point is about separating and purifying. Separating, purifying, and strengthening. Once you reach that stage, once you've completed the great work, then you're putting it all back together into something way better than it was to begin with. Way better than even, like we talk about Adam and Eve and the fall that humanity went through. It is a state of consciousness that is even more pure than the state that Adam and Eve existed in. So basically that's the path of magic in a nutshell. That's what you're doing when you're doing all this work. I'm going to uncover you guys stuff just to see what y'all are talking about. Becca says, I'm going to need to listen to this a few more times. Very dense. I realize that. I realize we have people on here that are at all different levels and stages of development. We have people on here who've been doing this for years. We've had people on here who are just starting this journey, just starting this work. And I know to those people, you're probably sitting here wondering, what the hell is this guy talking about? It will make sense to you later whenever you get to a higher level of understanding. Don't let it confuse you. Don't let it intimidate you. Don't let it, I mean, really, this is kind of one of those things that whenever you hear it, like in the beginning, I would have said, man, I'm never going to understand this. And I would have threw the book down and gave up. Don't worry about it. You'll understand it when you're supposed to understand it. The only thing you need to do right now is your basic practices. Do the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, and do the middle pillar. Do those twice a day, every day, and you will eventually get to the stage of understanding this. Somebody, I can't remember who it was just saying, here it is. Where was it? Afro Samurai 180 says, when should we start on the lesser hexagram ritual? Traditionally, like if you learned from either a master or a lodge or an order, traditionally you would do the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, and the middle pillar for 9 months before you would start to do the hexagram ritual. And here's the thing. You can start it before that, but you don't do it just for the sake of rushing through, just for the sake of getting to it, to feel like you're advancing, because what you're trying to do is don't worry about rushing through this stuff. Don't worry if it takes you 5 years. Don't worry if it takes you 10 years. I've been doing this stuff for what now? How old am I? Closing in on 50. I've been doing this stuff for at least 20 years. Don't worry about rushing through. If you do that, you're not doing anything but screwing yourself out of the process. You want to wring every ounce of knowledge, every ounce of wisdom, every ounce of experience, every ounce of growth that you possibly can out of all of these rituals. And that doesn't happen if you just rush through them. So take your time. If you want to do just those 2 rituals for more than 9 months, I would say do them for, even if you want to, a year. I would say after a year is probably really time to maybe up your game a little bit and go to the hexagram ritual. But at the same time, let me think. How long did I do it? I cheated a little. I probably started doing the hexagram ritual 6 months after I started the pentagram ritual. The pentagram ritual and the middle pillar, I did those for probably 6 months. And then I started doing the lesser hexagram ritual. The lesser hexagram ritual together with the lesser pentagram, I did both of those together for probably another 6 months before I went on and started doing the greater hexagram ritual. I did the greater hexagram ritual with those for altogether, I would say I probably did it. I did the solar hexagram ritual every single day for probably a year before I moved on to start working with, the supreme pentagram and all of the different angels assigned to those. I probably worked with just the solar pentagram, after I could do that, after you master being able to invoke all of the other planetary hexagrams, then you put them all together and start doing the solar one. I probably did that for a year before moving on to the next stage. So if you're doing this stuff 3-4 times a day, still do it at least 6 months before going on to the next stage. If you're not doing it 3 or 4 times a day, if you're only doing it once, maybe twice a day, do it 9 months, I would say. Let me see what you guys are talking about. Yeah, Sunshine says, wisdom comes from experience. You can't get it from a book. You can't cram it from a book. And that's exactly right. You find a lot of people, Donald Michael Craig called them armchair magicians, people who read a lot of books and talk about magic a lot, have a lot of conversations about it, all that kind of stuff. But they really don't spend nearly that enough time actually doing them. Um, yeah, you're not going to make a lot of progress. Just getting intellectual stuff in your head, just memorizing a bunch of correspondences or reading a bunch of books, getting all that stuff, like learning. It's not going to affect uh, your consciousness. It's not going to affect how you interact with reality. The only thing that's going to do that, the only thing that's really going to change you in that lasting, deep, profound soul type of way is the actual practice of magic. Yes, Katie says, I've got the rest of my life to work on this. So for once in my life, I'm being patient. Absolutely. That's the point of life here. You have the rest of your life to do this work. So there's no point and there's no reason to rush through it. Like I said, I've been doing this for, I can't even remember how long now. It's been so long, but at least 20 years. And still, I do my rituals every single day. I do an amount that would probably be intimidating or off-putting to people who have just been doing this for a short period of time. My daily work, like when I go through my rituals one time in the day, it takes me 3 hours to go through what I do one time. Let me see what you guys are talking about. Oh, someone just asked, where did it go? Where did it go? I can't remember who it was. Oh, Declan, I'm not sure how to say it. Sorry if I'm mangling it. Ask, are there any books that organize the information well to guide for practice? Donald, yeah, like Mercury Chan says, Donald Michael Craig's book, Modern Magic, is one that I highly, highly recommend. The top 3 books: Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic, John Michael Greer's Learning Ritual Magic, and I always feel weird saying this, but mine, High Magic. Those are the 3 that I think all 3 of those authors, myself included, tried to break this stuff down and make it as simple as possible. We the People says, what is the version of the Bible for someone who has never read it before? What is the best version of the Bible for someone who has never read it before? 2 things. One, there is something called the Companion Bible that gives you a really great concordance in it. So it tells you like root words and what certain things mean, and gives you certain translation points, all that kind of stuff. So the Companion Bible, if you want something that you can open and read in your hands, the Companion Bible, you can get it on like any book website for like between $40 and $50 maybe. But also, honestly, what I use more than anything, and what I recommend that you start with if you really want to read the Bible, is there's a website called Bible Hub, HUB. And the reason I recommend it is because it gives you the same scripture translated into a bunch of different ways. Like it gives you the King James Version, it gives you the New International Version, it gives you like a bunch of different ones so you can compare them. Each scripture it gives you in like 5 or 6 different versions so that you can compare all of them as you're reading and make sense of it. When you can see a bunch of different like ways of saying the same thing together, it makes more sense to you. I'm going to cut this off in just a second, just because we're already going for about an hour, but I said I'll get back to this in a second. At the beginning, I even made a note of it, so I remembered it, because I would never in a million years remember what I was talking about at the beginning of this video by the time I got to the end of it. But I was talking about how my brain just went blank again. What were we talking about? Biblical symbolism. What was it? Man, I cannot remember. The history of magic, how the current goes through time. And this also ties into the book of Revelations. Again, probably my favorite two books of the Bible, honestly, are Daniel, the book of Daniel, Daniel from Daniel in the Lion's Den, and the book of Revelation, because they tie really closely together. But we were talking about, how even like the story of Jesus walking on water is not unique to Christianity, that Xerxes the Great did it and Alexander the Great did it. They are from different time periods in the current of magic's history. So, like when you're talking about the beast, the great beast in the Bible, one of the ways that that it symbolizes like a political entity is that it says that it has authority, it has power, and it has a throne. All three of those things indicate that the beast is a political entity, which is another way of saying a government. It's the government. It says that it ascends out of the sea. What did we just say? What were we talking about? Water at the beginning of this. What does water represent? What is the sea? The turbulent masses of humanity, the turbulent masses of mankind. That is the source of human government. It's where it comes from. The beast rises from the sea because government comes from humanity. Humans give birth to it. It says that the number or the name of the beast is 666. But it says that this is, and I quote, a man's number. It says it is a man's number, meaning it's not a demon, it's not a spirit, it is a human creation. That's what that means. But the thing that I was talking to about the walking on water and the history and how it ties into Revelation, it says that the beast has 7 heads, and these represent 7 governments. But what governments? There's been a ton of governments in the history of the world. Well, those 7 heads represent the 7 primary political powers that have dominated history and taken the lead in oppressing humanity. So where did they start? The 7 heads, what are they? Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, ancient Greece, the Roman Empire, and America. Those are the 7 world powers that didn't just control their own country, they reached out and tried to manipulate the entire world through political means, sometimes through war, sometimes through sanctions, sometimes through, sending in the CIA to topple governments so that they could install ones that they wanted in its place. All of those are heads of the beast. So Xerxes the Great, he was the primary figure of the Persian Empire. Xerxes, if you've ever read the book of Esther in the Bible, the book of Esther, Esther is the wife of Xerxes the Great. She was his wife. Xerxes is the king. They don't call him by the name Xerxes. They call him a different name. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's Xerxes. After Persia came the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was another one that was said to walk on water. And then after the Greek Empire falls, then the Roman Empire comes and takes its place. And it says at one point that the beast gets a wound and it looks like it's going to die. I'm paraphrasing. it gets a wound in one of its heads and it looks like it's going to die, but it rises again. That means after the Roman Empire began to collapse, it looked like this world devouring kind of government was coming to an end, that it was finally going to collapse with the Roman Empire. But it says it looks like it has a mortal wound, but it rises again. It does not die. That's because we did have one more come after it, which is present day United States. And that's, I can't, oh, I remember how I got into that. I was going to say, I can't even remember how I got into that, but it was because we were talking about Xerxes and the history of magic and the current as it passes down through civilization and all of that kind of stuff. So, something a little extra at the end. Let me see what you guys are talking about. Oh, Aiden says, what about every European power between the year 1400 and 1949? All of those were the remnants of the Roman Empire. I mean, you're talking about Europe. You know, that's what Europe was. When the Roman Empire began to break apart, keep in mind, first off, it broke apart into 10 pieces. That's the 10 toes of the statue in Daniel. You know, feet have 10 toes on them. All of those were the crumbling remnants of the Roman Empire. Let's see. Just looking through to see if you guys are asking anything that I need to address before we go. So we the people says, how can we get him to do a 3-hour stream? I don't think anyone wants to hear me rambling for 3 hours. Okay, guys, so as a matter of fact, I'm going to cut this off now just because we're already a little over an hour and I don't want to bore you to death. Let me see, 1 second. Bonessa saying, out of curiosity, do you no longer feel the energy of the ley lines in the area you moved into? So that's the first part of the question. And the answer to that is yes, I do. And I think it's part of what has made me kind of so prolific in everything that I've been covering since I moved in here. It's like revitalized me, refreshed me. But at the same time, it's time to move on. It's time to do something else. And will I be able to not teach classes while you're here? No idea yet. Everything here is still kind of shut down right now. A lot of that will depend on how long I'm here and whether things begin opening up or not while I'm here. You know, like in the building, they have all these conference rooms and stuff that you can use. Well, you can't use any of those yet. They're all still locked up. You can't, you know, I can't have anyone come in because they still got everything on lockdown. So I don't know yet. Yes, Pedro, so am I. Pedro says he's excited for Magnum Opus. You cannot imagine how excited I am. Yeah, Pedro says my rice. Okay, I know this looks crazy. This is my rice. This is an entire bucket of rice, and you can even see more bags of it behind me. This is what I eat at every meal. I eat this 3 times a day, and I keep it on my altar so that I can do magic on it for healing. And I do that every single day. And then whenever I eat it mindfully so that while you're eating it, you visualize it saturating the body. Yes, Marilyn, the baked nurse, says it'll all work out. That is absolutely right. Even though, you know, everything is going to work out exactly like it's supposed to. That's absolutely true. Okay, guys, I'm going to cut this short, and I will talk to you guys in a couple days or so. Yep. Okay, guys. Again, also just wanted to say thank you for all the work you've been doing in sending the donations for getting to New Orleans and starting the school up, and also just spreading the word and getting it out to people. You guys have done an absolutely amazing job, uh, and it gives me a lot of hope for what this school is going to become. I mean, if you guys are this passionate about it and this behind it, putting this much energy behind it, I think something amazing is going to come out of this. And I am really, really excited to get this going as quickly as I possibly can. If there's any way in hell that it's humanly possible, I would love to get something going in some way by Christmas of this year. All right, guys, it's good talking to you, and I will be back with you in a couple of days or so. Take care and have a good night, and I'll talk to you soon.